Great, and I'll just reintroduce that now that we're recording. This first demo is going to be Brian Grinstead showing us his UCAN Check app that he created, which allows people to paste into UCAN and see what all the little bits are in the UCAN, which is, if you haven't heard of UCANs before, think of it as a distributed systems JWT.
Yep. So everyone's got my screen okay?
You bet.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is an app I just started working on just this last week called UCAN Check, which is a UCAN validator and explorer. And this is just a preview version of UCAN Check. At this point, it only supports the latest version of the UCAN spec. And if you want to make some of these UCANs, you can actually check out this new UCAN library that we've started working on. This is also brand new, just like a week and a half old. But this app is using that in the background to validate the UCANs and decode them and break them apart. So it's got two parts, a place where you can paste in an encoded UCAN, and then over here on the right, a breakdown of the header, payload, and signature. And we've got a little show example UCAN button. And so we can click that, and you can see we've populated in an encoded UCAN. These are base 64 encoded. And over on the right, we've got our header section, payload section, and the signature. And the signature is just the raw value for the signature. And we also have a little explanation section that gives you just kind of a short form explanation of what do all these fields mean. There are links here to the JSON Web Token RFC if you want a lot more detail on these, and also our UCAN specification. So this has a lot more long form detail, kind of explaining the motivation and how you use these different parts. This is just intended as kind of like a quick little snippet of, what is this field and what does it mean in the UCAN? And so let's take a look at this UCAN. This UCAN is its algorithm, which is the algorithm used to sign the UCAN, is EDDSA, so it's signed with an Edwards key. Its type is JWT. UCANs are just JUTs. The UCAN version is 0.70. And the audience is this DID. This is the DID that this UCAN is granting capabilities to. The attenuation field is what are the actual capabilities that are being granted here. So the capability in this case is overwrite, and it's being granted over this resource, which is WinFS, the web native file system. So we're granting overwrite to demoUser.fission.name's public photos directory. And the expiration time, just how long is this, when does this UCAN expire? How long is it valid for? And the issuer, this is the DID of the issuer that has the authority to grant the capabilities in this UCAN. And the UCAN has to be signed with the private key of the issuer, and we are validating that here. I'll show a little bit later that we'll get an error if we have a broken UCAN. NBF is not before, so this is when does the UCAN become valid, and this allows you to create like a window of validity. So you could say, I don't want this UCAN to be valid till a week from now, and then I want it to be valid to expire a week after that. And so you have just kind of this window where you can set the start and end time. And then the really interesting field is the UCAN proofs. So this is a proof chain of nested UCANs with equal or greater authority to grant the capabilities that we've listed here. And if we look at the raw value of this, you can see it's this long string. And this is just another UCAN. And we actually have a show next proof button here, and we can click this to take a look, to examine the UCAN that we have here in this proof field. But before we do that, we expect that this UCAN is going to have as its audience this issuer, because it's, it should be granting capabilities to this issuer. And so looking here, this did ends in NBHU. And if we click show next proof, our audience does indeed end in NBHU. And we can see that we're granting, capabilities to the same resource, same exact capabilities, and it's being granted by some other DID. The proof in this case is null. So that's how we know that this issuer is sort of the root authority for this resource. And it would be possible for them to say, this UCAN could be like demo user.fission.name/public and be granting something with greater authority. And then the other one would be just granting authority to, capabilities to just photos.
And let's just give a live example of that, Brian. So the reason that you're doing these proof chains is that without pre-coordinating or pre-setting up, let's say API keys or other things like that, what you can do is you can have a Photos app, and the Photos app itself has access to the capabilities to read and write to a Photos folder. And because it has that authority, it can pass on read, write, or just read to that Photos folder, anything of the same or less. And the reason that an app might do this is actually classic sort of microservices style, but without having to have it under one control. So a Photos app might delegate to a Filters app, as an example, as a trivial use case of things like this. Obviously, when we're talking about reading and writing to a file system, you can see how it'd be useful to have an app be able to coordinate with other apps on what capabilities it has in terms of working with files.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for that example. That's a great, to put it into context. And I see you've picked up a small thick something in your name.
Yeah, exactly. Joris asks, can it also validate age?
What do you mean by age?
Oh, like an app that is for adults. So an interesting thing is, essentially, I would call that verified credentials. So UCAN is kind of a decentralized auth wrapper for a number of different things. We use DIDs natively in them. So for us, it's the native decentralized auth protocol for DIDs because we didn't find one that existed. Verified credentials, I think, this might be a wrapper for them in different ways, but I'm not quite sure if that would be built directly into UCANs. That might be a separate flow. Brooke, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. The main question is, which is the source that you trust to validate the age? So typically with verifiable credentials, you'll have a government that has some government agency that has a known public key that they're signing things with. And then you can say, okay, all of these attestations are from a trusted source. The holder of this UCAN is over this age, right? There's nothing, because we're not a signing authority of that kind. We don't have any way of building that directly in, but a service provider could do that, absolutely.
I think it's a very good question. So verified credentials, we think, is the next big thing in this space, and we'd love to integrate them in different ways and have convenience functions for them. I'll give a more specific example that might seem more trivial. So right now, we're each one of these flows, if you've used a Fission app before, you can go to drive.fission.codes as an example, will ask the user for permission to access for certain things. So a verified credential may have another ask around other elements. So for right now, we have whether or not an email address is verified is something that the Fission service knows about an individual user. And an app developer might say, hey, can I check to see if this account has a verified email? And you can think of other Sybil resistant sort of things where the verified credential there would just be a yes or no, without having to actually share the email itself, which is the same general pattern. age verification would be, is this person over 19? Yes, no, with a cryptographically signed way. So it's a very good question. It's a similar kind of chain of proofs. Not today, would love to work on it, is the answer to your question.
Yeah, so that's the app. We have a lot more that we'd like to add to it. You know, one thing is like moving forwards and backwards through the proof chain, or, you know, being able to kind of examine the issuer and the audience side by side a little bit easier. Oh, and that's right, I was going to show that, like, if we do some crazy stuff here, then you know, we'll get an invalid UCAN message. And this, you know, is very general. It's has a bad signature, bad attenuations, or encoded incorrectly. So adding a little more granularity in error reporting when you've got a bad UCAN is another thing we'd like to add. And if you're playing with this, you know, come by the Discord and let us know if there are other things you'd like to see. The URL is pretty easy to remember. Just remember that if you want to check UCANs, it's ucancheck.fission.app. And I'll put that in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, I posted it already. Amazing. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's going to be critical, especially as more and more people start using UCANs in applications. They're going to want to be able to have some tools to debug these things, and what do all these things mean, and understand the new format. Similar to JWTs, but obviously, as we went over, there's some critical differences in how Fission works, how Web Native works. So thanks for that, Brian. And then moving along to the main course, a little while ago, we started discussing with, in particular, Daniel Buckner, with the who works at Microsoft, but works generally on ION, which is part of the Distributed Identity Foundation's work. And the interesting thing is that ION is one of the only other systems that actually has shipped something that could be called a distributed identity. So we wanted to see if we could do some sort of level of interop, like there's the very thinnest level of interop with ION, which is using an ION DID to access Fission systems and create an account. And then we went a little bit deeper with that. And so we've had this project running for a couple of weeks, and Brian is the main developer that's been working on it. And so he's just going to walk us through how that works, what we've done with ION's DID system and Fission. And Brooke, if at any point you need some, you can jump in with some color commentary for the larger perspective on this. That would be great. So take it away, Brian, again, who's
I'll actually, while Brian's getting set up,
sure.
let you know a little bit more about like why we did this, what the goals were, and some of the setup that you're not going to see directly in the demo, because some of this is actually running on a server. And looking at server logs, I'm sure is very exciting, but it's like literally one line just because it's a successful, login. So we've been using DID key, the key method for decentralized IDs for a while now. And we're looking around, we're like, surely somebody's done, these are all decentralized, they should probably interop. Surely somebody's done a interoperability layer. And the answer is no. So we decided to do our own. So this is our first sort of proof that this can actually work in a context. So essentially, ION uses a protocol called Sidetree. They root their IDs on Bitcoin. So setting them up can take a little bit of time. But then that identity already is owned by the user and lives somewhere else. So this is completely separate from Fission, right? So they have this identity, they're using it with their Microsoft stuff. Then they want to use this single identity for their Fission application. We've made it so that they can use that ID and the keys associated with it to log into our system, which really just meant changing our user registration to accept ION DIDs and like that, and that was it essentially. The one part that we won't be able to show you today because we were having a hard time with the ION tools. It lets us create DIDs, no problem, but changing the keys or deactivating them was just giving us tons of errors. So we won't be able to show you that part, but in principle, what would happen is if you were to change the keys associated with this DID or invalidate the entire thing, and then try to log into Fission or use one of your UCANs, because the ION DID is at the root of that UCAN chain, all of those UCANs would be invalidated. With a system that's completely separate from Fission, right? This is the whole idea, is that something over there makes a change here, and that the user is the one in control. So with all of that extra context, Brian, please take it away.
Okay, sounds good. So I have a DID here, an ION DID that I made earlier and registered using their ION tools. And you can see they have this nice little explorer, that identity.foundation/ion/explorer that lets us look at the DID document and some details of it. You can see that it was created with an Edwards key, ED25519. And this is the DID that we're going to use to sign up with Fission. And I should also mention that this is really purely for demonstration purposes only and just showing that it's possible. This is not something that we're shipping because we've essentially kind of made alterations to our auth lobby to allow you to sign up with an ION DID. And you'll see that part of that process includes pasting in your private key, which is obviously a terrible idea, but is, for the purposes of just showing that it's possible, that's what we're going to do. And so we're going to start off by signing into Fission from Fission Drive. So our goal is going to be to start off in Fission Drive, go to the Fission auth lobby, make the account there, and then come back to Drive and have access to Drive. And so if we click sign in with Fission here, we go over to our altered version of the auth lobby and select create account. And we can put in an email and pick out some Fission username. Okay, that's one that has not been taken. And then we can put in our ION DID that we were just looking at. And this is calling out to ION using ION tools to check that this is indeed a valid ION DID and it's been registered and it's on their chain. And then lastly, we can get our private key and paste that in here and click get started. And that will create our account. We're not going to link any devices, so say remind me later. And then for Drive, we're just granting permissions to use Drive here. And then this will set up our file system in the usual way with Fission and take us over into Drive. And there we are, skins52, a new user in Fission. And we signed up using our ION DID. And that's basically the demo here. It's mostly just kind of these UI pieces. Do you have other things you'd like to add for that, Brooke?
Yeah, so I'm just going to paste in the chat.
So basically, a lot of this is saying, here's an app that without having to pre-integrate ahead of time, because the system natively understands DIDs, and in this case, we've expanded it to support DID ION as well as DID key, that remote DID, the portable user identity, can control resources and capabilities on another system. And if we revoked this DID, or invalidated it on the remote system, then you would no longer be able to log into or control the resource on the Fission system. This is the goal of these kind of portable identities, is that you can mix and match the authority of identities carry them around with you, and that the source of that identifier, whether it's one you issue yourself or another system like did ION, has full control over that. We're still doing things like natively issuing you a username, because a Fission username is something that we control in the namespace of Fission, but the authority for it rests with the remote DID.
So the thing that I pasted in the chat, which is now multiple messages down or up, is the text record associated with that. So for those who don't know, we use DNS text records to distribute the DID associated with the username, the ones that Boris was just mentioning. And if you look at this one, it is rooted in ION. So it says DID ION, and then the canonical ID. You can go and look up all of their, in a native Fission application, you have one root key. In ION, you can have as many as you like. And so that gives you the ability to say, okay, well, this user has these keys, and I can then go and validate that any of the keys in the DID doc that they'll return to you are the things that you're allowed to sign with, which is why if they then go and rotate those keys or invalidate it, you then look at the signature and say, well, this isn't signed with one of these keys. This isn't a valid DID or UCAN anymore.
Cool. One question, just following up on what you were talking about, Brian, at the beginning. Can you walk us through sort of the limitation that caused us to need to paste the private key when we were signing up?
Yeah, the limitation is that ION tools doesn't really provide you with a good key management solution at the moment. We're not aware of any apps that have implemented it, kind of like a mobile app or a web app or something that would have allowed us to do linking between those things.
Yeah. And so conceptually, the way that I was thinking about this is like within the crypto sphere, that role would be played by MetaMask, which is the most common user flow on crypto-oriented websites. There's an extension that holds a private key, and it's able to supply that sign up instead of just pasting it in the field. And then another way to do that would be to have that private key held into something like Trust Wallet, or what Fission does is it actually holds that private key in the Web Crypto API in a browser. And so ION is just currently at a state where they don't have that handy mobile app or extension, or there isn't an ION site that you can go to with a session that's holding that private key in the same way that Fission does and supplies it. So to clarify, for the demo purposes, we're just getting it to work, which is super cool. I think this is really interesting stuff, and interesting that there's only really 2 systems that we know of that we could get working this way. But obviously there's a fair distance to go in terms of a consumer experience, but it's easy to see the parallels with how this would work with something like MetaMask or Trust Wallet, or Fission itself. Say if we were going to have an interop going the other way, so there was a Microsoft service that supported ION DIDs and we got them to support Fission DIDs as well, we would use the private key and Fission system to perform that function on the other side. So,
and when Jeff's saying Trust Wallet, basically using some sort of QR code flow like Wallet Connect. And in general, we're quite bullish on the pattern of things like Discord and other things like that. WhatsApp, Signal use very often QR code linking on another device. So Fission does that in a number of different ways natively within the system that we do. And a good experience would look something like, Joris, you said, please, no browser extension. So Fission's starting point for a lot of this was, in fact, the constraint of saying no browser extension and must work on mobile. And we attempted to do it, including no other devices having to be linked ahead of time as the base case. But we think a really great user experience does actually end up being something that looks like QR codes. We've had a couple of people, Brian did the setup there where you set up a new account And by default, unless you look very closely, we trick you into scanning the QR code so that you immediately link a second device. And in general, when that works well, we've heard from a lot of people that they're like, oh, I was unsure what happened, but all of a sudden I was also linked on my phone. So lots more work to do, because again, this is an unfamiliar pattern, and we've had feedback from people that no passwords can seem strange, but we've seen a lot of recent writing. I retweeted on the Fission account something actually from Microsoft, talking about how from Microsoft you can actually remove passwords. How do you make sure your password doesn't get cracked? Don't have a password.
Since, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Since Wallet Connect and MetaMask and whatnot came up, so for the crypto types in the chat, one of these that I'm excited about potentially integrating down the road, there's a did ether type, did type as well, which uses an Ethereum key. So instead of in this flow, this can be used for progressive onboarding. So you would show up, sign up with an in-browser key, non-exportable in the Web Crypto API, right? So still secure. You start using the app, and then you want to link in crypto assets. So underneath, using Wallet Connect, calling out to your wallet on your phone or another device or wherever. And you're then able to link in, because of the way UCANs work, they're very flexible. You can link in arbitrary DIDs as long as you can sign some random payload with it, right? So in that case, that would be the UCAN. So then you can link in those identities and say, yeah, sure, I'm willing to give my, essentially now web identity access to, this much ether over this much time, or access to call these smart contracts or whatever. And so you can start building up from these pieces with a much nicer onboarding experience than step one, install MetaMask, step one, plug in your Trezor wallet or whatever.
Yeah, and broadly, I think the direction of a lot of this stuff is multi-chain support as well, which is particularly tricky in a lot of these systems where today's flows typically mean that you can only be connected to one thing at a time. And if we, like right now, roughly, there's one browser extension per chain. And this is the same issue we had at the beginning of a lot of these OpenID systems, and that we're seeing in DID, and we want to converge a lot of this. And even just some of the usability of saying, pasting in these keys is no good. The pattern we'd like to follow is doing something like, there's sort of a shorthand that we use that we haven't exposed broadly yet, but some app developers in our community already use, where Boris is my username in Fission. We actually give you a subdomain of fission.name as sort of a default place that we keep a lot of information about you. And we think that email-like identifiers are really easy for users to remember. So if you type in Boris at fission.name, or you might type in Boris at ion.microsoft, I know that's not a real domain, and it could then go and look up the key that you have associated with that system. Joris had a question about WebAuthn. Jeff said absolutely, and Brooke answered it a bit. WebAuthn is a lot of the USB key sort of systems. It's sort of a parallel implementation, and it is very server-centric and very centralized in that there's a central checker for that, and all of our system has been to remove the central checkers. So there's a bit of a challenge in integrating the two, but the user flow of having a key that you can just tap is really, 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 really nice. So we'd like to get there in some way.
Yeah, when I think about systems like that, or say someone has an existing enterprise authentication system backed on Auth0 or something like that, the game there would be just to take the existing system as it is and then proxy it so that it has the capability of producing DIDs, or people have the capability of authorizing You know, these hybrid systems will have central authorities probably, but they'll also be able to issue UCANs, and those UCANs will be parsable, and they'll have properties that can be checked back on the proof chain and work in a distributed way as well. Brooke and I were discussing this at one point, and she said, but it's just extra steps to enter an email address. And I was like, yeah, but existing systems and integrations is, you know, everybody's already using these things. And so adjusting, you know, how that works to integrate on the back end with a distributed DID system is it's work. But these organizations are going to have it as a requirement because they won't switch. Nobody switches overnight to anything like this.
And I think the baseline for this is to understand, right? We started building our system from day one to support DIDs because we saw it as the best path forward for having portable identity that could support things like offline and completely self-sovereign things. We chose a very basic DID key rather than creating DID fission. That's one of the issues right now, is everybody's making their own flavor of DID rather than converging. And we think keys are obviously the broadest thing that you can do. So we started with there. Some other recent news, and that's creating a lot of more interest, in the reason that we're working on this right now is that we kind of sprinted to make this work in the browser with key management built in, because we've got encrypted files. So we had to solve the key management problem, and we had to solve a way to pass capabilities around with this. And so we had to invent UCANs as a mechanism for it, keeping it very close to JWT. As other people start tackling this problem, we're very happy to see that a number of people are saying, man, I don't want to have to figure this out from scratch, and are starting to adopt UCANs and are starting to adopt DIDs as a solution. So a couple of things on that. Query, which is a large data science provider that does really interesting things with large data sets, and also builds a lot on IPFS, QRI.io. They've adopted UCANs and actually wrote an implementation of UCANs in Golang. We mentioned the new standalone UCAN library. So the other thing that we've done is that people want to start consuming pieces of the Fission spec without having to take all of it, which is totally fine. That was always our intent. These are open specs and will be implemented in different ways, and we're starting to make that easier. So Daniel did the hard work. He did a lot of the initial work on this. Recently left the Fission team, but he came right back around and is actually working with the Twitter Blue Sky project in doing some initial hacking on UCANs and DIDs. So that's fantastic that we basically have more people working on these specs and more interest. Cake and Chris are on the call. They're with the Filecoin Protocol Labs team. So Fission shipped some Filecoin private keys in browser as some grant work that we did. Chris is the lead author on something called Origin, which is a template for making Web3 apps, especially with Filecoin and IPFS. Web3 is sort of one level up from blockchains. All of our stuff doesn't need blockchains. We use IPFS for a lot of things. And that's been really fruitful in looking at how we can make apps that work really well and kind of create accounts on the fly without users having to go through a lot of process. Brooke is going to be speaking at a Twitter Blue Sky event on October 15th. That's also up on Luma. And once we get final details on exact timing of that, we'll send out an email blast so that people can join that if they like. I think that's going to be a Twitter space, isn't it, Brooke?
It is, yeah. So audio only directly on Twitter. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I think that's a bunch of background that's super useful to share. Jeff, any other color commentary? I kind of covered a lot.
Yeah, you covered a lot. I'm trying to think. No, that's great, but it's been really interesting getting in touch with people working on this stuff over at PL, and then we had a great discussion around the Origin project the other day. I want to look further into that as well. I think it's exciting times.
Yeah, this is just coming together. Joris actually asked in our Discord, W3C, which is the main kind of web standards body, recently kind of gave a big thumbs down to DIDs generally. And one of their dings really was there's not enough interop. And like, honestly, we've found the same thing, which is why we are starting this of saying, hey, anyone who has active running DID implementations, let's talk about making this work together, including all the way down to how should it feel like, how should you communicate to users that you can log in with like this. So we're looking forward to, basically, it's only going to get better from here. And besides standards, this has to work and solve real problems. And what we're seeing is multiple organizations coming to the table and saying, great, this solves a problem. We need some decentralized auth. We'll take a look. I did want to share that we've got a couple of, I'll post links in here as well. Had some really, really nice feedback recently from a couple of people. One was user Ethereum, who's semicolon in our Discord, that said, if you're a Web 2 dev and wishing you could contribute to Web 3, go take a look at Fission. Really easy to start building, excellent white paper. So one of the things I want to do when we do our demo day is say thank you very much for people to like caring and checking us out. That was really nice to hear. And I think that's true. I think Web3 is sort of bigger than blockchain and cryptocurrency, and we're trying to make a lot of this stuff, work peer-to-peer and so on. So it's really great to hear that. The white paper is pretty intense, but if you like white papers, then you'll probably like Brooke, because she likes talking about this stuff, and go have a read and hang out. Another one is Quinn Wilton. So she said, Fission is a piece of emerging technology that I'm most excited about. The first time I saw it work end to end, my eyes were open to a whole new approach for building software. I really can't recommend looking into the work Brooklyn Boris and their team is doing enough. Amazing. Thank you, Quinn. I think the other thing that we're generally finding is we're really saying, what if you don't use servers? What if you had more peer-to-peer? What if users own their own data? That last one in particular is maybe not obvious here, but apps ask for permission to the user file system. Users have a personal data store. That's another project within the Decentralized Identity Foundation. We've kind of backed away from doing more on the spec purpose because we realize without more people working on Interop, it's just too soon to work on that. We have a system that works. We'd like to interop with other people, but what we need is more people to wrap their head around, oh shit, I don't have a server. I don't have all the files here. I don't have access to them. Again, like not having access to passwords means you can't leak them. Not having to maintain user data means that you can't leak user data. Never mind the benefits of if a user, much like we have on our desktop, has every single app operating over a single file store, it means you can easily switch apps and move between them without an import and an export sort of step. That was my photos and filters example before. So we very much welcome to people to hack on this. Like, that's what we need right now is hacking. Put together an app. If it's too hard, let us know. How can we help you? We've got templates. Brian wrote a little to-do MVC, the kind of classic throwaway app kind of thing. And you can build full edge apps with Fission's SDKs today, basically.
Unintended. Pun intended.
Yes, unintended. Questions, comments, thoughts, excitement?
Another thought that I have recently is that I think that Web3 will do a lot around no code or low code, where you have more tools available for creating something on the web. So I think that's at least the space that I'm going to try to explore a little bit more and hack a little bit more on, because I think that's a great valuable thing to do. You see it already now that people are trying to create things on the web and doing a lot with NFTs there. But I think that you can go a little bit further upon that as well. if
So-
you see, for example, for the metaverse and so on, yeah, why not building tools there that people can create 3D environments and then go into that? But of course, these kind of applications are very hard to build on your own. So I think that's also why I don't start with that. I start with something much more easier. But these are just thoughts that I had recently and I try to pursue for now.
Absolutely. Couple of comments there. One, Chris and Cake, the folks who built that React website app builder, I forget what they're called, but I'll follow it up later and find the link. There's a number of sort of React tool builders, React and Tailwind tool builders, where you can drag and drop elements onto a page. And that's the exact kind of experience that I want to see, where you can just come to Fission, you can sign up, you can drag and drop a bunch of things, IPFS and file.
Talk about DraftBit, right?
What's that?
Talk about DraftBit, right? The UI block builder where you can like drag. Okay, cool.
Yeah, right. Where I think that, Joris, fits with your no code, where you're coming in visually, you're dragging and dropping and stuff, and then you've got a live app. And we can do that today. Like all the tools are there for that. Funny enough, literally the Fission homepage, I started with the React builder and went, fuck it, here's a new version. And then Stephen did an amazing amount of work and actually styled it. Right. But excited about that. Secondly, metaverse. Here's a funny story. What if the metaverse is actually just connecting humans together and their data? Like, you might think of a super visual version of various things like that, but once we start having shared data, yay, that's a metaverse.
Yeah, yeah, can be. We'll see.
I mean,
I hope
versus silos.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't gonna be the metaverse of Facebook and Mark.
James, I was looking for the right formulation, right? What if the metaverse is the data we gathered along the way? Cake's like, no.
I do like friends. I do like making friends along the way. I think that there's something to be really said about like innovation in the clients, right? So we think of things in a lot of terms of web pages, right? And like websites and DNS, but like if we get a lot of the stuff right, we'll be making new clients and new type of devices that hold keys and then interop with different services. And so that innovation does not belong purely to Facebook. If that, I mean, that's also like a battle that they're aware of. And so they're trying to win different clients as well, like, you know, VR, AR, and like having their identity system first and foremost in those devices. But I think, you know, we can think outside the box too. We can create new browsers, new browser protocols, and make some of these things first class and ultimately have a lot of good success.
Yeah. And I think if you then try to get tools out there that people that are not tech savvy can use to build things and to connect things all together, then you get a lot of more adoption, a lot of more possibilities out of there. So in that regard, I think if you see the Web 1.0 where people could build things, you still need to be a little bit of techie to create a web page. You need to know HTML, CSS, and so on. Of course, there it was a lot this decentralized. I think now, yeah, we need to see how we can create and give people more power to create and build things and show things that are from their own.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that this pile of technology could do a bit better there from the existing sort of cloud native scene is that if I create an app and it's really useful to a lot of people and they want to put their data into it, if it's cloud native, then I start having to pay RDS bills like right away. And so the cost of discovering if an app is useful at scale is very, very, very high for the developer in particular. Whereas if I create that same app and it's all the data is on IPFS and people pay for their own IPFS storage, or there's a freemium model, then the cost for me as a developer of taking a risk and creating something new and interesting is relatively low because I don't have to pay the server side bills just to be popular. And especially the danger in not monetizing a hyperscale application right now is that you go broke right away, and the danger of not monetizing that app with distributed data is negligible, because you're not necessarily, as a developer, paying for that data storage. The individuals would have their own data storage.
Yeah. So absolutely right. I mean, this is one of these things is two pieces. One, we've put the stack together so that front-end developers can add the stack into their front end and not have to build a full stack and not have to have a central DevOps expertise. And so, as Jeff says, this scales at the edge. You could go all the way to have even thicker clients, to your point, Cake, where you're doing something on desktop and other things like that, where you're relying on the Commons network of IPFS and other plugins like Filecoin to keep your stuff around, including that people can just participate directly by themselves to help share the data, right? So that's the design goal. Today, as a developer, if you want to ship a full app, you have no choice but to become a full stack developer, including figuring out DevOps. We're saying plug in a few bits and pieces, and I think that's what's been exciting about various Web3 backends that you can lean on for various capabilities. I think our other insight has been there's various things that have to become table stakes: end-to-end encryption, portable identities, portable data, and all of those things are hard. So what we've done is done a lot of R&D as an approach to make them turnkey, and now, and basically using strong cryptography in order to rely on those things. So you don't, Peter had a couple of comments about wanting a couple of people to sign off on various things, where you just remove that. The developer can't get at the user's access. But it does mean you can't just take an off-the-shelf Rails framework today. I will say the other thing that we are getting requests for is that we teleported directly to 2052, and people are like, but we actually are going to be using servers for a while. So Blue Sky, as an example, was like, yeah, like we get it, but like we need a server-based version of UCANs. And so great, like no problem. Hence, there's a Go version, and we're making sure that the new JavaScript that we write in generally should work both in browser and in Node.js as a goal. And I know Nick has been banging on a bunch of these bits and pieces as well. So appreciate all the questions and comments as well. It's super helpful. We'll try our best to keep supporting other people doing it, and we're a small team and trying to make it better. So it's great that like Blue Sky is funding Daniel to do work on this.
Thank you, Daniel.
Nick, any pains we can help solve for you live right now?
Am I Nick?
Yes, you're Nick.
Okay. No, I mean, thank you for making the demo app of UCANs. I've been working on making something similar, I think, but yeah, I'm just kind of getting into this space here. Yeah, the person Jay Graber introduced me, Arca-Linnea, I think. But yeah, I'm just kind of exploring this space here, coming from more of the world of SSB in the past. But yeah, I don't have anything pressing right now to talk about. I've been kind of haunting the Discord lately. So.
Yes, I wanted to make sure to call that out.
Okay.
On SSB, we actually had a call and had more participation a while back from Rabble.
Yes.
Who's working on planetary.social. And what we discussed is that Rabble is a completely native mobile-based application that works on secure scuttlebutt or SSB. And their challenge was, how do they interop SSB keys in browser? and they found that they needed something that looked like UCANs and other things like that. So we hope to circle back around at some point. And Jeff talked about QR code things. We'd love to have a flow where if you have the Planetary social app and your SSB credentials, that you could log into a web page or Fission itself with your SSB credentials. That's the same pattern at the end of the day. If you have to go through the web, you're gonna need to make something that looks like our UCAN stack. Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Jeff, Cascadia JS, do you want to mention that briefly before we hit stop on the report? You're muted.
Yes, I am. All right. So Cascadia JS is happening this year. This is a long-running Pacific Northwest area JavaScript conference, and it's run by Carter Abassa, who I've known for years. And usually it rotates around, or this was the historical pattern, between Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver. And that was super fun, going to another city every year and attending all together one big JavaScript conference. 2020 was a virtual conference, as you can well imagine, as the times that we're going through. And then Carter is innovating yet again this year by having a distributed combination virtual and IRL conference. So there will be essentially watch parties in Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. I'll be hosting the Vancouver version of this at the UBC Theater in downtown Vancouver. We have COVID regulations that we're adhering to. We have a capacity of 120 here in Vancouver. Similar things are going on in Portland and Seattle. So if you're in those cities, you should check it out. It's going to be great. Brooklyn is speaking on DWeb in general, and then slide some Fission stuff in particular in there, of course, when it makes sense. And it's going to be exciting to see if this hybrid model works, where we actually have 3 cities all wired into the same space. We have virtual presentations from speakers in their homes or their podcast studios or whatever. We aren't actually doing presentations where the watch parties are. So that's the weird thing. Brooklyn will do her presentation probably exactly where she is right now, and then maybe head down for some coffee afterwards and hang out with the attendees. But I think it's interesting and shows a lot of hustle trying to get these events going again, because these events can be great instigators. These events can put people together that otherwise it wouldn't have met, and then maybe they'll start projects and do great work together. So yeah.
Are we able to tune in if we're not in Cascadia?
And absolutely, you can tune in and attend the conference virtually as well.
Do we have any discount codes, Jeff?
Yeah, we definitely have discount codes. I will hook you up.
Okay. So Brian is, I think, going to be in Portland and is going to go in person. James is going to be attending virtually. It is going to be West Coast time. So like the back half of the day is going to be a little awkward for folks in Europe and vice versa. If you're in Asia, you could, wake up at the latter half of the events. But I think that's the one thing is it's somewhat time zone centric.
Yeah. By design.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Does anyone else have anything broadly, like stuff they'd like to share, interesting news, stuff you've seen recently? Community shilling. Amazing. I'm going to start by stopping the recording.